There's no beginning and no end, but this piece tears itself away from all self and tumbles outwards into endless dark space. A bright shard, falling, falling. The sheer impossibility of it, the dream, the reflection born from yearning. Oh, desire, pulsing through like a heartbeat, like blood, like the very beginning of all things. But beginning now, again, and falling away into separation, grief already at the tearing vastness. As light separates, entangled particles are flung apart from each other, eternally remembering, and now, separated. The utter experiment of the universe falling. A butterfly shimmers into being, a fragment of an impossible dream, a dream of a dream. Its wings unfold, and it falls. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. And the Kabbalah is, of course, a vast, enormous study. Probably thousands, possibly tens of thousands of books have been written on it. And here is another one. I just would love an indication of those of you who have read or are familiar with the Kabbalah, with the Tree of Life. Can you just give me a little show of hands? Yeah, thank you. I myself, long before I wrote this book, attempted to read books about the Kabbalah because I felt like I was looking for the mystery. And those books may have had the mystery in it, but it was couched in such a mysterious language that I couldn't actually access it. So I've met this from many other people saying, well, yeah, I read the books, but somehow, they're speaking another language, which sometimes is literally true as well. So I guess I was on a personal journey to try and understand. I think I was born wanting to know why we're here, why the universe exists, what it all means. I wanted to understand everything, right? And of course, this is a very hard quest to be on. And although I got many clues along the way, I kept hearing these whisperings that something made me think that the Kabbalah, that the Tree of Life, had some fundamental piece that I needed or wanted, but I couldn't crack it. And so the way that I personally cracked it eventually was realizing that the only way that I ever really learn anything is a very, what I'm calling embodied way. That is physically with my body. Whatever was spoken about embodiment, as in that you're doing the practices, yes, but that's not actually what I meant. What I actually meant was you step into the tree with your body and start having experiences inside it, not on a page, not even on a page of my own book, but that you actually in some way create a tree and physically, bodily step into it and start doing magic and ritual and trance and even reading the book or whatever it is, creating altars from inside the tree. And how I did that to begin with was I found a quite large room with a wooden floor, and I got a few pieces of chalk and 9 other people who were a bit experimental. And I physically drew out this map, this glyph of the Tree of Life on the floor with the sephira about that big. And we went and stood in them, in the tree, and we started doing ritual and magic and discussion and processes and all sorts of things from within the tree. And that's when it really kind of came alive to me and started speaking to me. So that was about 15 years ago, and I have been experimenting since then, and working, and playing and doing all the things. So I just briefly backtracking in this term Kabbalah, which is a Hebrew word, it means to receive. And so that's the kind of first thing to know about the Kabbalah, I guess. So that's what it is. It's a receiving. And we could say, well, what is it we're receiving? And I think a Kabbalist would say everything. We're receiving everything. Each breath that we take, we're receiving it. Our lives, we've received this life, from the divine, from the stardust, from this earth, from our parents, wherever you want to go with that, all those places. And each piece of knowledge or mystery or challenge that we meet or love, we're receiving it. We're these great kind of receivers. Of course, we're perhaps also doing things and producing stuff, but the Kabbalah is to receive. And so we're in a state of receptivity when we're in its mysteries. Now, one piece of the Kabbalah, which is a Jewish mystery tradition, one piece of it is this thing called the Tree of Life. Sorry for me gesturing up here. I have here a show and tell, which some people can see, of my version, one of my versions of the map of the Tree of Life. And part of the traditional Kabbalah work is always that each student creates their own tree, basically, however they do it. And some of my students do amazing things with embroidery and molten glass and all sorts of things, felt work, as well as cardboard and things like that. Like this one up here. So I have done them in physical form, like that's how they got on that poster. So life is a piece of the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah, is a vast philosophy, understanding of life, and debate, really. It's never meant to be a static thing. That's the thing about Kabbalah and about the tree, is that it is built upon debate and discussion and experience. It's not supposed to be a dry tract that you read and then you've read it. It's a living thing, a living system, and that's why I love that they've got a tree, as a living system to model it on. So this Tree of Life, this is a map, basically, and it's a system map. I don't know what to do about these people over here. There's 3 chairs there in the middle, or maybe 4 chairs if anyone from down there wants to shift so that you can actually see what I'm pointing. You can see it. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this thing is my iteration of the Tree of Life, but you can find many other versions of it, including quite dry versions of it, which just circles with names in them. And I'm going to briefly talk through why I think it's a map, not just for occult ritual, but of the universe. Because this one, Keta, up here, so these circles are called sephirot, that's the plural, and sephira is the singular. And sometimes people call them discs or states or various things like that, spheres. They're more like a realm. And when I say a realm, a whole way of understanding the universe. Each one of them is a whole complete understanding of everything from a particular lens, from a particular perspective. And then in the Tree of Life, they're all put together in a certain order and arrangement. But they're not contradictory, but they're all profoundly different from each other. But they all operate at the same time, kind of at full force. So when you look at this, you've got 10 different versions of the way things are, the map of the universe, if you like, all happening at once. And it's true that often in the tree we move through it, this is in gold here is this lightning flash, which is one kind of the fast way to move through it. There are also lots of paths and pillars and triads and all sorts of other structures. But basically, that doesn't take away from that these are 10 different ways of being and understanding the divine, the world, everything through this map, just so you've got some orientation. So Keta at the very top, and the English translation for that is crown. I think of this as the point of singularity at the beginning of the universe, basically. So the point of singularity just before the Big Bang is when everything was gathered together, everything that is still here now, was gathered together into an impossibly tiny, tiny point. And the argument is, and I believe it, that nothing has been added to the universe since that time, and nothing has been subtracted. So it was all there. That was everything. And to me, that just, there's no division, there's no separation. It's all there in this tiny, tiny space. And to me, that is a perfect expression of the divine, of the most profound divine that you can get. It's everything. And it's everything all in one without any separation or difference. And it's in a way, it's very simple. It's very pure. It's very the one. It's the one. So what happens then, as we know from our history of the universe, imagined history of the universe, is that something happens, that there's a change, a split, or the beginning of a split, where that one begins to change, split, separate, and suddenly it's breaking apart. And this second sephira, Chokmah, really kind of encapsulates that. Okay, what happens when everything splits? So when everything splits, you get like a mirror or two pieces, like the moon split off from the earth. Kind of it's still theoretically, part of the earth, but it's now separate. Or a child is born, like it was totally a part of the mother. They were one thing, at one stage indivisible, and then there was this process of separation, and now they're separate. So this process of separation, in a way it mirrors our longing for the divine and perhaps also our memory of belonging to that place. Chokmah. And in our story of the universe, what happens very quickly past that point of singularity and at the beginning of the Big Bang, which I prefer to think of as the Great Expansion, is that it all starts breaking into many pieces. And I align this with Bina, the third, and the translation for that is understanding. By the way, the translation for Chokmah is wisdom. And so in Bina, this place, things start happening in the universe, as we know, very quickly. And so we could think of, well, like there's this one and it's split, and as soon as it's split, there's all kinds of possibilities. All kinds of things can start happening. And the manifold things, and things like life and death. At this stage, probably life and death of stars, or, like the transformation of atoms or clouds or whatever it was happening, interstellar clouds was happening. But still, beginnings and endings start to be possible and start happening. Now, those three are all called the top triad, or the supernal triad sometimes. And they're kind of so far beyond human understanding, that's amazing we're even able to talk this much about them. But here we are. So we press on, we go down through here. This area in here is called the abyss. And this silver disc is Darth, or Dart, which is not actually sephira, it's a non-sephira. It's a place of possibility and unknown. For it is knowledge. So it has all sorts of implications about trees of knowledge and tasting knowledge and the results of that and blah, 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 where you fall down. It's all about falling, I think. So he comes through there to this next sephira, Hesed, which is called mercy, or sometimes the translation is loving kindness. And here, this is like the outpouring of possibility, of love, you could say, of the divine love or life force, like the endless outpouring, how it just keeps going. Yes, star systems die, and you know what? Then the atoms gather together somewhere else and birth new stars, like this endlessness that keeps going and going and going, pouring out through the universe. And it's balanced by the sephira on its opposite side of the tree, Gevurah. And the translation for that is power, or sometimes and it's the limits. That's the end. So you get this endless outpouring, things are always becoming, and they're also always stopping or dying or limited. Like the star does die, and then more stars are born. But there is this ending. Like in human terms, you could say like our skin is a container, is a limitation. Like it holds us together. So in this system, nothing is bad as opposed to something good. So it's equally necessary that you have the limits, that you have the stops, that you have the containment, as that you have the endless force. Like if you only ever had endless force pouring forth, you couldn't really have form. So this creates form. And down here we have Tiferet in the middle, in the heart of the tree. The translation for that is beauty. And it's a kind of balancing force between Hesed and Gevurah. It's also a reflection of Keter coming down into the middle tree. And in the Christian Kabbalah, they would place Jesus Christ here on a cross. It's a cross in the middle of the tree. And really, Tiferet is, to me, like the heart of the system. The broken heart, the open heart. It's got a lot of, when you put the paths in the tree, and perhaps if you're familiar with that, you know that Tiferet has so many paths, more than anywhere else. Everything's coming, everything's going. It's like this constant balancing system. One of my students called it Grand Central Station. It's a busy place with a lot going on. And so it's trying to balance this endless outpouring and this endless containing. And we come down here into Netzach, eternity. I personally think of this as the garden. So this is the place where that endless outpouring goes into things like I could think of like within a garden, like all the millions and billions of different living things that exist, like one after another, kind of outpouring of existence that happens in the garden. And it's coming closer, in a way, coming closer to us, to our lives. And I'm just, like, as soon as I'm saying this, I realise all these other things I'm not saying. But this is just a very rough mud map. Over here, we have Hod, once again balancing out Netzach. I think of Hod as the library of the system. The translation is glory. And for me, this is the form that is placed. So yes, we have endless ferns, for example, being born here. But every fern has a structure and a shape, and it follows certain laws. Yes, we have all these different kinds of atoms, but actually they're all following a particular structure, like each hydrogen atom or each whatever it is all following this. This is a kind of place of fine structured detail. And so we come into Yesod, which is in this middle. Foundation is the translation for that word, and it's the realm of the imagination, the mythic, the mythos, the collective unconscious, and it's been written not by me, but I like it, saying that the only way from Malkuth or Malkut, where we live, into any of the rest of it is through Yesod. That Yesod is the bridge, that our imagination, our minds, our collective thinking, our dreams, our trances, our wishes, our longings are the way that we can understand any of this or have any experience of anything other than what is immediately happening in our world right now. So it's lovely that we're in a basement, for Malkuth, the earth, the tree, roots of the tree down here in Malkuth. And so it's called Kingdom, and it's the kingdom of the crown. So it's commonly said that Keter exists to produce Malkut. Malkut exists to reflect Keter. And so we're down here, like literally we could say everything that we've ever known, seen, done, happened, understood, happens down here. And the rest is our imagination, our opening up to the map of the universe. I mean, we could say that these very atoms in my hand, for example, were actually part of the Big Bang in an earlier form. They started off that way. And so every single bit of everything that's in this room actually was back up there, and actually still in some way belongs to that. But we're down here in this realm of separation and difference and bodies having this experience. Map, my map. I'm going to read you a little section out of my book. This is actually out of the introduction. Each student of the Kabbalah has their own Kabbalah. Mine is the Kabbalah of broken butterflies, the briefest and the brightest. They wouldn't let me call this book the Kabbalah of broken butterflies. No. I had to fight really hard to get them to call it Falling Through the Tree of Life, let me tell you. The publisher wanted to call it Embodied Kabbalah, and I pointed out there's 3,000 books called something Kabbalah, and who can remember which one is which, but anyway, I partly got my way. Humans, all living creatures of this earth, are bright and beautiful. And compared to the tree, to the divine, to the universe, we're impossibly brief, almost impossible, but then miraculously possible, existing anyway in spite of our brevity. What could we understand in these few moments of universal time granted to us? Hardly anything. And yet, something. Caterpillars eat the leaves of the tree on their way to becoming butterflies. They bind themselves to a tree in their process of transformation, trusting it to hold them as they dissolve their bodies and allow the wondrously named imaginal cells to recreate them in their butterfly form that will be birthed, open its wings and fly through the tree. How much can a butterfly know of a tree? It is fed, sheltered, birthed by the tree. Like the butterfly, we stretch our metaphoric wings and flutter through its leaves and branches. The tree formed us, and so we belong to it. But we know only a tiny part, and that imperfectly, from our butterfly or human experience. Rather than understand it, it would be more true to say that we are it. The butterfly is the tree in butterfly form. I am the tree of life in human form. And in living, I'm breaking open from the chrysalis, breaking my heart with this life, breaking free from old selves, breaking down my form as I fall through life's journey from birth to death. I think of us as shards, as sparks of life flung out from the beginning of the universe, falling into this momentary form as human, just as the tree breaks apart into its many selves, its 10 sephirot. They're always still part of the one, the all, just as we are. Merged together, we are unbroken, and the very atoms of our cells remember that. But as individual selves, we're always broken off from the divine, though striving to remember and return with every heartbeat, every lover, every mystical quest and heart-stopping ritual. Breaking is not a bad thing, but an opening, a remembering of who we really are. Like a butterfly, the tiny colour-drenched feathers on their wings brushing off here, there, parts of them crumpling and tearing, each one of their lives a song to the glory of life. Like us, flying and falling, intrinsically a part of the all, and yet just separate enough to hold the reflection. Flying but falling. In the tree of life, we fall from the very top of the diagram, Keter, the divine, where all things are one, to the very bottom, Malkut. It's like gravity. The only thing to do is to fall. Malkuth is the living world that we're part of, where we live and die and create love. Born through another human's body, we fall into this life, and at the end we fall out of it, through the gateway of death. Alive, we fall in love, with ideas, with other humans, with land, with magic, and if we're lucky, with life itself. Falling is surrendering, letting gravity take us, toppling from the divine to the human, mirroring the biblical descent from paradise to earth and the fall of the angels. Falling is about separation and union. We fall away from the other, the beloved, the all, but we fall into the embrace of the lover, the dark earth, fleshy incarnation. It's all about falling. I'm writing this book to dare the dark stretch of the universe, to attempt to capture the bright sparks that whispered the gods into being, to redeem meaning. I'm a butterfly, perched or falling through a tree so impossibly beautiful, the structure of the universe etched in its branches, the poetry of its leaves and buds. I ate of this tree. The cells of my body were formed by this tree as I lay bound in a cocoon to a twig of this tree in the imaginal realms, unknowing of what could emerge, or how brief and bright my life would be, transformed and falling, so delicate and pigment drenched with life force and dying in each moment. I fell in love with the breath of the tree, and each breath of mine shared with, from, through the tree. The tree wrote me, the tree sees me, breathes me, holds me, forms and unforms me. My body, the tiny scraps of breaking wings, will nourish the earth-drenched roots. But in this moment I fly, flutter through the spaces cut out in space by this tree, and celebrate, dance, glory in what I am reflecting and born from and born for, this moment of treeness called butterfly. I'll write as the butterfly flies, falling, on its brief and terrible journey, catching a wing and tearing those delicate feathers of colour. Time eating it up faster than it can fly, falling. I'll write for the butterfly, and for love and impossibility. So, it was spoken briefly what's in this book, but I am also going to speak to it. I mean, it was nearly impossible to write this book, I have to say. Like, it actually was impossible. And I was stuck writing on the concept of trying to write it for a very, very long time before I managed to. Partly because this is not a linear system. Like, books are linear. They start in one place and they kind of progress through to the end. And there's nothing about these set of concepts and ideas, really, that is linear. So I have devised various ways to make it unlinear. And there's different invitations in the introduction for ways that you don't have to read it from the front to the back to still make sense of it, and it is written that way. Right near the very beginning, when I was attempting to write the book and totally not writing it, I had this, there were so many concepts in my head, and however many notes I made on however many bits of paper, there was just more and more. I had this image of two octopuses, in fact, fighting. Or writhing, you know, with all their tentacles, 16 tentacles, you know, interacting. And I felt like trying to follow the ideas that I had or that were in here was like trying to understand which tentacle belonged where. You know, and as soon as I almost got a grasp on one of them, of course they would move. The whole system was a moving system, you know, so I would lose it again and it would be brushing up with another idea or another set of ideas in some wildly interactive way. And so I felt like I was wrangling that all the way through the book. And then finally, right towards the end, I had also avoided writing about Darth, like right towards the end. And I also thought that was like the impossibility of the all impossibilities. And I went to the dentist. I wrote a lot of this book through lockdown and through the pandemic, which was fine because I was just like, okay, I'm just going to write my book. That's the one thing I have to do before I die is write this book. But anyway, the restrictions had lifted, and for one reason or another, I was in the dentist chair, and they had a video screen overhead, and mostly I had my eyes closed, but I happened to open my eyes at one point, and they were showing an underwater documentary, and there was no sound, but they had subtitles on, and so suddenly in my eyes there was these two octopuses, right, with all of their tentacles all entangled, and of course I was riveted, like this is my vision, you know, here it is in front of me. And then the subtitles said that they weren't fighting, they were having sex. And I was like, oh, you know, all this time I thought they were fighting, but actually they were having sex, like that's marvelous. And then these words said, and it's just, this act takes many, many hours, it's very elaborate, all 16 tentacles are involved, right? And it said, and shortly after this they both die. And I was like, and it just seemed so Kabbalistic, like I have to say, you know, that kind of, those octopuses really, I don't know, something's going on there. So, yeah. So in the book, as I was starting out to say, I have written, to the best of my ability, a really thorough essay on each one of these 10 sephirot, and at the back, as a kind of bonus, even one on Darth, on like all of my concepts of what that sephira is about, what it means, how the world kind of works through that lens. There's a lot of what I call technical aspects of the tree as well. There's this lightning flash, there's what is a sephirot, there's these pillars going through here, there are triads, there are paths, all these technical things about how the tree, the mechanics of the tree work. And so I've also got 10 sections, one in each of the sections of the book, on the mechanics of the tree, like how this thing works. And then, as was referred to, I have my memoir sections, 10 of those through the tree, which attempt to, like, they're very personal, they're very specific, they attempt to give a really kind of close-up understanding of one person's experience of whatever sephira it is. And I think that the invitation in that is, the more that one generalizes, in a way, the less people can relate. If it's really specific and it's really, really obviously me, somehow it seems to create space for, maybe I'm being optimistic here, but this is my idea, it creates space for other people having very specific personal journeys of their own with those sephirot. The whole invitation of the book is there's also 40 exercises, processes, spells, rituals, mainly I made them up, But, practice them and rehearse them and try them out on things. So that's also in there. And there's also this invitation to create a version of your own tree. Like the easiest and most common way to do it is with cardboard discs, really. And this is one of my sets, which has been turned into this thing here. And the advantage of this is that, like my original plan with the chalk on the floor, is that you can actually lay out your discs and do ritual and magic within them. Like actually go into the tree. This is not laid out but correctly, but you get the idea. So if you were working with Yesod, you might be actually physically sitting or standing or casting a circle or whatever you're doing in here. And you can actually kind of be within the tree and have it happening. And so each one of these discs represents, for me, like a month's work with that particular sephira. Magical, personal kind of study, all the things. And at the end of that time, I created a disc that's got some visual representation of my experience, I guess. So there's many other ways to do it, and I would be the last person to say this is the only way or the correct way, but that is the invitation that is written into that book and how to do it. So with the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah, it used to be, as I understand it, in the Jewish tradition, that, and this is not really the case any longer, but that there were three distinct schools of Kabbalah. Okay, and I don't know if they didn't talk to each other, but they were distinct. And one of that was the school basically who engaged in Kabbalah as an act of worship, as a way of reaching the divine, of just being in worship of that, of the life force of the divine. Like that was the purpose of that school of Kabbalah, if you like. And there's another school of Kabbalah that was more kind of academic. It was like, we want to understand this. They studied it and debated it, and they were like, how does this all work? And why is it working that way? And what if we did this? And so that was really like, academic, I think of it as an academic school of Kabbalah. And then there's a third school, which is the magicians. Like the people who study Kabbalah to create magic and ritual and change, basically. And I think modern Kabbalah schools, and I'm still talking in the Jewish realm rather than the occult realm, pretty much combine all of those three things, although they might have different emphases. And I think that's definitely the invitation for readers and Kabbalists today is, you have your own preferences, your own needs. Maybe one year you're really into magic and ritual, and the next year you're more interested in reading about it or researching, who knows. But there definitely are those three strands running through the history of the Kabbalah. And I myself, of course, am a bit of a magician. I actually like it for magic. I mean, I think that really, I can really feel myself and find myself in those other two strands, those streams. But for me, it's a magical work. And by that I mean like being in the midst of, I don't know, like the universal forces, and knowing myself within it and creating change. Sometimes personal change, like that's a really obvious thing to do with this type of magic. And in terms of personal work, personal development work, like the Tree of Life, this map thing, is amazing because it emphasizes contrasts and differences, and its kind of fundamental thing is balance. So, one could come to it going, like I just, every time someone asks me for something, I just give. I'm just always giving. I keep giving and giving and giving and giving. So you could say, like how Hesed, except not Hesed in a good way, perhaps, because, you're being depleted by it. But still, that energy of endless giving, very Hesed. But you know what? Hesed only exists and is only able to exist that way because of Gevurah, because of creating limits and boundaries, because of being able to say no, because of being able to be right-sized and choose what and when and how. And so if that was what you were coming in going, I just give everything all the time, you would, by default, find yourself working with Gevurah and learning and leaning into that. Not to become less giving, but to understand the limits and the boundaries and the containments of that and how to do it, basically. So that the sephira itself would teach you that, but working magic and ritual or personal process with it. And in my book, I've got a combination of those two things. The personal process invitations, I guess. Certainly with Gevra, I know I've got one about boundaries. And also the magic and ritual, like how to, and some invitations into magic and ritual. And really with any of my books, like all my books are workbooks, and all of them to me are really an invitation of, look, this is what worked for me, this is how I did it, feel free to start here and, you know, go your own way. Like the tree is a wild and amazing thing, that's the universe, and you could go in untold directions. And people are always sending me emails or photos or things that they've done that I never would have thought of, you know, or that I would never have done. And so I think really everyone does have their own Kabbalah, and you make it your own. I'm going to read another little piece. And at the end we do have time for questions. This is a little piece about written about Chokmah. This second, it's out of a big piece, but I'm going to read a little part of it. Splitting, even momentarily, creates space. Space where Chokmah, although it came into existence as a reflection of or part of Keter, differentiates. Within space and time, they become inevitably, increasingly differentiated from each other, even if all their difference arises purely from that single original difference. Keter split in two, or created a reflection of itself, while Chokmah was split off from, or was the mirror, or reflection. Because they are from one source, there's always an inference that they remain parts of the same thing, that even in their increasing difference and two-ness, they are still one. This deep mystery is part of the terms of our existence. When we are born, we emerge from, separate and yet created by, another, by our mother, by both our parents, by all of our ancestors, until this time, by molecules and atoms and stars exploding, and we never escape this. When we die, this state of separation dissolves, and we return back into the oneness, which, it could be argued, we never truly left. This great story of separation and return plays through not just each human life, but every life and everything. Stars come into existence, great masses of gases and other elements drawn together into a body that we name star. At the end of their lives, their mass has dispersed again back into the fabric of the universe. The building blocks that created them have been changed by their existence in the star and then returned into the all. Every breath we take could be seen this way. Breathing in, we separate that air from the all to become a part of ourselves. And then, in breathing out, that air merges back into the all. With our first and last breaths. At our first breath we enter into life as a separate living being, and at our last out-breath we die, so returning to the great, essentially indivisible whole. Each breath, while it's within us, we transform, so each breath is part of changing the dynamic whole. Our own lives that we live change the all. So Chokmah, by changing within itself, changes Keter. I have to say, like, it starts off very philosophical up here, and it kind of gets more practical down here. And some Kabbalah books are actually written the other way, from down to up. And when we say down, that's all relative, of course, because if you think of a tree, which this is modelled on, like a tree actually doesn't begin at the top. Like most people, when you draw a tree over this system, you put the roots down here and Malkuth down in the earth where we are, and the topmost leaves and branches and buds and things up here. But when you think about a tree, it doesn't really start with the topmost leaves. So it makes more sense to draw the tree upside down, and that this is the roots, this is all below the roots even, this is where it comes from. And all the way down here, we're at the outmost reaches. And I forget why I started saying that, except in the Kabbalah, it's really important to know it's always and. Yes, the tree is that way with the roots down here, and it's all happening down here in the roots, and that's the far distant branches that we can't even imagine. And at the same time, that's actually the seed or the roots, and we're out here in the outer reaches. And it's not, one doesn't lessen the other. It's not like, oh, a bit of this one and a bit of that one. It's both full on all the way. And the sephira are like that. They're 10 complete differences. They don't lessen each other or alter each other. I mean, they kind of alter each other, they alter themselves, but they're all at full strength at the same time. And one way that it's been described to see these sephirot, to see them as they are all one, there's so many different ways, my head's filled with ways, but one way is to say, like, up here there's this blinding light, like, you know, the beginning of time, everything all gathered into one place. So blinding you can't possibly look at it or see anything, you know, like it would burn the retinas of your brain out of your eyes, so forget it. But what we do in an attempt to understand that image is we fling a veil over it. I didn't make this up, I'm just repeating it to you, but we fling a veil over it, and so here, and that's a way of seeing Chokmah. It's the same thing but with a veil thrown over it. And so it's still blinding, you know, it's still enormously bright. Maybe you can see something just around the fringes of the bottom of the veil that you can see, okay, but the light is still completely blinding. So you throw another veil over it and you get being a third iteration of the same thing. Still impossible to look at, still impossibly far away, but you're beginning to get some idea maybe of the outline of the veil, okay, not of the thing itself, just the veil. And so you keep coming down here and you throw more and more veils, each one is another veil is thrown over this same thing. And by the time you get down here, you're actually starting to kind of see something. But of course, you can't really see the original because it's obscured by 9 veils. So what you're looking at, although you can actually see, is what the effect of 9 veils has on something. And by the time you get down here to where we are, and there's 10 veils, like, it's amazing we can see anything at all of the divine or of this purpose or of this map. Because what we are looking at is essentially this layers of veils. It's a lovely little thing. Is that reminding me that that I should be nearly asking for questions? Yes.
I'm just really interested in what you're saying about embodying and moving through the tree as well. And I'm just wondering if any of your students or you yourself have done any kind of dance?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. People have done dances, people have created musical kind of iterations of it, like of their experience, people who are composers. Yes, all sorts of things. No stopping the imagination of the possibilities.
Have you thought of like specific movements?
So I haven't done a dance. Although what I have done is I've got a very big room, and sometimes I lay my discs out and I just like dance through the tree. But I have not created a dance for it. But maybe that's your job.
Yeah. So you have a zigzag which connects them all. And I've seen representations which have lines in different directions. Do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between
Okay, so this gold line that I've picked out here is called the lightning flash. And it's kind of a fast way, it's an unmapped route, and as you can see, it is like lightning. And so that goes in the order of creation, if you like, of these discs. So if you follow that in either direction, you're actually going in the order. So other lines that are drawn on the tree is what is called the paths, or sometimes the pillars. Firstly, there's the pillars. So this is one pillar, the left-hand pillar. This is the middle pillar, and this is the right pillar. And sometimes there's just lines connecting those together, and sometimes they're not lines. They're kind of whole channels, you know, like test tubes, kind of collecting them there. And so there are also sometimes lines on a diagram that might like connect the top 3. This is the top triad. That might connect these 3 here and this one, which is the, you know, so they might differentiate the triads. And then there are many, many lines on turn another page kind of thing in your mind. Many, many lines connecting and creating paths between the sephirot, which especially in occult magic, perhaps more than in Judaism, is a way to travel between one sephirot and another, or between many of them. I do have a section on paths in my book. I have worked with them. I am less into the kind of golden dawny kind of prescribed trance although I think that, obviously is meaningful and powerful, and probably many, many thousands of people have done that. So I'm not kind of trying to take away from it, but perhaps it's less my thing. And yeah, I'm interested in the paths as they work for me, or as they connect. Oh. I want to say that's all the time we have. The universe is ending now.